My name is Evelyn Grace, and I'm 74 years old. I used to be a midwife, a devoted Christian woman, and a mother of 3 beautiful children. I served my community for over 3 decades with hands that caught babies and hearts that held secrets. I was the kind of woman who baked on Sundays, prayed before every meal, and wore the same silver cross my husband gave me on our wedding day. Everyone in the neighborhood called me Mama Grace. No one would believe what really happened behind closed doors, not even the church folks who smiled at me every Sunday. Especially not them. I remember the sound of the door slamming behind me, locking me inside the room like I was an animal. My heart raced as I backed up against the wall, the cold from the cement floor soaking through my slippers. My son Malcolm, my firstborn, my pride, towered over me, eyes dark and voice rough like broken glass. "Mama," he said, "you're not going anywhere until I say so. You hear me?" That night, he'd pulled the phone cord out of the wall again. He said I talked too much, that I was too nosy, asking where the pension money was disappearing to. I wasn't allowed to ask questions anymore. 5 years. That's how long I lived like this, in fear, in silence, in shame. But that night when he raised his hand, I didn't flinch. I grabbed the ceramic lamp from the table beside me and smashed it across his face with every ounce of fury I had left. Blood sprayed across the wall like paint. He screamed, and I ran. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to escape. After 5 years of torment, something inside me broke. Finally. But just when I reached the gate, I heard it. The click of a second door. And a voice I never expected. "Where do you think you're going, Mama?" That voice didn't belong to Malcolm. It was another voice. Someone I thought would protect me. But how did it get to this? How did the woman everyone loved become a prisoner in her own home? Let me take you back to where it all began. It was the summer of 2015, and I had just buried my husband, Thomas. After 47 years of marriage, he passed away in his sleep with a Bible on his chest and my name on his lips. The pain of losing him was a storm I was not prepared for. For months, I walked through the house like a ghost, staring at his empty recliner and forgetting he'd never sit in it again. My children came around more often during those early months. There was comfort in their presence. Especially Malcolm, my firstborn. He was always the strong one, even as a boy. He had a deep voice and a quiet demeanor, and people naturally respected him. He told me to come stay with him for a while, just until I got back on my feet. "You shouldn't be alone in that house, Mama," he said, cupping my hands with his. "Come stay with your son. Let me take care of you now." Felt loved, protected. But nothing could have prepared me for the darkness that waited on the other side of that kindness. The first few months were sweet. He made my tea just the way I liked it. He let me watch my evening shows and walked me around the block every evening. I cooked for him, cleaned his kitchen, folded his clothes. I was happy to be useful again. But the sweetness didn't last. The first sign was subtle. He started locking the front door with a key only he had. I thought it was a safety measure. Then he began controlling what I watched. He said the news was too depressing for someone my age. He disconnected the TV. Then came the words. "You talk too much, Mama. You never listen. You're not in charge anymore." First I thought he was grieving. Maybe the loss of his father was too heavy. But the way his eyes shifted when I asked about my pension, that wasn't grief. It was something else. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found Malcolm going through my handbag. I asked him what he was looking for. "Don't question me," he snapped. Froze. His voice had thundered through the room like a gunshot. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own child. From that day, everything changed. He stopped calling me Mama. He called me Evelyn. Cold, distant, like I was some stranger living in his house. He installed a padlock on the pantry door and said I ate too much sugar. My knees ached from arthritis, and he refused to refill my medication. He said I was becoming too dependent. I remember the night I wet myself because I couldn't make it to the bathroom on time. He laughed. He actually laughed. "You're turning into a useless old bag," he said. "My Malcolm. My baby boy." Every day became a careful game. Walk on eggshells. Don't say too much. Don't ask about money. Don't complain about pain. Just smile and be grateful. But I wasn't the only one who noticed something was off. My daughter, June, started visiting less often. She said Malcolm always made excuses why I couldn't come to the phone. "She's sleeping. She's bathing. She went out." But I never went anywhere. One day June came by unannounced. Malcolm told her I wasn't home, but I was stairs, behind a locked door, listening. I banged on the floor with a broomstick, hoping she'd hear. He didn't. And when she left, Malcolm came upstairs. He didn't say a word. He just locked the door behind him. That night was the first time he slapped me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even loud. It was slow, calculated. His hand across my face like a stamp of ownership. "You made me do that," he whispered. "You embarrassed me." That was year 1. And there were 4 more to come. Each year he took a little more. My phone. My keys. My dignity. He called it care. He told people I had dementia. That I wandered. That I was confused. That's why no one listened when I tried to speak. I even began to doubt myself. Maybe I was losing it. Until I found the receipts. My pension was being withdrawn in chunks every month. Spent at bars, casinos, and clubs. That's when I realized, this wasn't grief. This was greed. And I was his captive. The final straw was when he threw my wedding album into the fire. I screamed. I tried to save it, but the pages turned to ash before my eyes. "That life is over, Evelyn," he said. "You're mine now." But no, I wasn't his. Not anymore. I had a plan. I started writing letters, hiding them in the hem of my old church dresses. Each letter was a cry for help, a breadcrumb trail in case I didn't make it out alive. I memorized the neighbors' routines. I watched the locks. I pretended to sleep when he came home drunk, listening to every word he mumbled. And then, on the night I broke that lamp over his head, I thought I had finally won. But the voice that came from behind that second door wasn't his. It was deeper, colder. And it said, "Where do you think you're going, Mama?" Because I wasn't just living with one monster. There was another. And he had been watching everything, waiting. "Where do you think you're going, Mama?" Froze. That voice, slow, chilling, didn't belong to Malcolm. My mind scrambled. I turned slowly, heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else. Standing in the shadows of the hallway was Terence, Malcolm's younger brother, my second son. Terence had always been the quiet one. Moved away to another state years ago. I hadn't seen him in over 2 years, and suddenly he was here, in the house, in the middle of the night, watching me try to escape a prison I didn't even know he knew existed. He stepped forward, the dim light revealing something in his hand. Bottle. His eyes were glossy. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice tighter now. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was dry. How long had he been here? How much did he know? I thought you were in Florida," I stammered. He chuckled coldly. "I came back a few months ago." "Malcolm didn't tell you." He took another step forward. The hallway felt smaller, darker. "So now you're running. After everything he's done for you. Done for me." My knees gave way, and I sat on the floor, stunned. "He's been stealing from me. Hurting me. Locking me in this house like a prisoner. You call that help?" Terence scoffed. "You always played the victim. You think raising us alone after Dad left makes you a saint." His words stabbed deeper than I expected. "Your father didn't leave. He died." Terence's lips curled into a grin. "That's what you told us." I blinked, the air thick with something I couldn't name. What was he saying? Terence turned the lock on the front door and yanked the key out of it. "You're not going anywhere, Mama." "Not yet." I realized then. I had escaped one monster only to land in the arms of another. And this one hated me. He grabbed my arm with a force I hadn't expected and dragged me back toward the living room. My scream echoed through the house, but no one would hear. The neighbors were too far, and besides, Malcolm had trained me to keep quiet. Terence shoved me into the armchair like I was a sack of rice. "We'll wait for Malcolm to wake up. Then we'll sort this out as a family." I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw my way through the walls. But instead I sat there, my heart sinking into a place it hadn't been since I was a little girl hiding from the war sirens. How did my boys become this way? When did the sons I raised with prayer and porridge become my tormentors? It wasn't always like this. Let me tell you about the little boy Malcolm used to be. The one who cried when his toy car broke. The one who hid under my wrapper when thunder clapped. The one who whispered, "I love you, Mama," every night before bed. Back then I believed love could fix anything. And maybe it could've, if I'd seen the signs sooner. Malcolm was only 9 when he first hit Terence. It wasn't just a boyish squabble. He punched his brother in the ribs so hard Terence couldn't breathe. I remember scolding him and forcing him to apologize. But he didn't say sorry. He just stared at me, cold, angry, like I had betrayed him. I thought it was just a phase. But it wasn't. When he turned 16, I caught him pushing a neighbor boy off his bicycle because he wouldn't let Malcolm ride it first. The boy scraped his chin badly and limped for days. I marched Malcolm to their house and made him apologize. He did. This time. But the look in his eyes. At me. Like he was acting. When Malcolm went off to college, I thought the space would help him mature. But he came back worse. More withdrawn, more controlling. He couldn't hold down jobs, blamed everyone for everything, and slowly started isolating me from others. And when Terence moved out after a heated argument, I thought, good. At least he's safe now. But I was wrong. Terence might have left the house, but he never left Malcolm's grip. After my husband died, the house fell into quiet despair. That's when Malcolm invited me in, using grief as the bait and guilt as the chain. First I told myself it was just stress, that maybe I was a burden. I didn't want to admit what I suspected deep down, that my son enjoyed the control, that the look in his eyes when I cried wasn't shame. It was satisfaction. The years passed like a slow death. He took over my bank account, sold my car, made up stories to friends about how I was declining mentally. And I went along with it, afraid, ashamed, too old to fight back. Until that night when I saw my wedding album burn, and something inside me snapped. The lamp, the blood, the run to the door. But now, here I was again back in the chair. Another son. Another enemy. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I waited until Terence went to the kitchen. My mind raced. If I could make it to the back door. If I could just scream loud enough. But then I saw it. My church dress. The one I'd hidden the letters in. Lying wide open on the floor. Terence had found them. He walked back in, holding the bundle of letters like a trophy. "So, this is what you've been doing," he said, voice laced with mockery. "Planning your little escape. Crying to God and the neighbors like you're some battered saint." I reached for the letters, but he pulled them away. "I should burn these," he growled. "Just like your past." And then, a knock on the door. Soft, deliberate knock. Terence froze. We weren't expecting anyone. And then a voice. "Hello, Mrs. Grace. It's Officer Daniels. We received a wellness call. May we come in?" The silence in the room stretched like an iron wire ready to snap. Terence looked at me, panic flashing in his eyes. And then he smiled. He picked up the letters, walked calmly to the fireplace and tossed them in. One by one. The flames danced. And the knocking got louder. What would happen if they left? What would happen if they came in? And most importantly, who made the call? The flames ate through the first letter before I could even scream. My cries caught in my throat as Terence fed the second one in, watching it curl and blacken like a ritual. He didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Outside, the knocking turned urgent. "Mrs. Grace." Officer Daniel's voice now carried concern. Is everything okay in there? I lunged forward, but Terence blocked me with one arm and forced me back into the chair. You say one word, he hissed through clenched teeth, and I swear you'll regret it. But something changed in his face. Which? He was nervous, and that meant he wasn't in control. For once, another letter went into the fire. You're destroying my truth, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. You're destroying me. His expression hardened. You destroyed us first. The last letter danced in his hand. I knew what was written on that one. It was the only one that named them both. That revealed everything. Where they'd hidden my ID, my medication, my will. Open the door, Officer Daniels said, now more firmly. We've received a serious call about your well-being. Terence stood still, one hand still clutching the letter, the other slick with sweat. For a second I saw the little boy in him, the one who used to hide behind my skirts during storms. But he wasn't that boy anymore. With a shaky breath, he moved toward the front door. I shot up from the chair and yelled with every ounce of my being. Officer Daniels! I'm in here. He's hurting me. The room exploded in chaos. Terence spun around, eyes wild. The front door burst open with a crack. 2 officers stormed in, weapons drawn. Terence dropped the letter and raised his hands, but it was too late. Everything happened fast. Screaming, shouting, commands, and then silence. I stood there, swaying, arms trembling. A female officer rushed to me, draping a blanket over my shoulders like I was a war survivor. Felt like one. I had survived a war no one knew I was even fighting. But then came the question. Ma'am, she asked gently, can you tell us where your son Malcolm is? I blinked. He's upstairs. I hit him with a lamp. I thought he was unconscious. They nodded, signaling to the EMTs, who rushed up the staircase. But I knew something was wrong the moment their footsteps slowed. Seconds later, one of them called out, "We need a body bag." A body bag. Gasp. No. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to stop him. The female officer gripped my shoulders. Mrs. Grace, you're not under arrest. Please calm down. But how could I calm down? I had killed my son. The boy I nursed. The baby I sang to. Tears blinded me as I collapsed into the officer's arms, my cries shaking the walls that had held my pain for 5 long years. They let me sit in the back of the ambulance while they took statements. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't hold the tea they offered me. Terence was already in the back of a police car, eyes staring forward in stone-cold silence. I felt like I had died too. But that was only the beginning. Because once the police left, once the ambulance drove off with Malcolm's body, once the flashing lights were gone, I was alone again. Truly alone. The social worker arrived the next morning. Her name was Chelsea. A kind-eyed woman with curly brown hair and a clipboard filled with more questions than I had answers for. She walked through the house quietly, noting the locks, the burned letters, the bottle of expired medication in the cabinet. "I've seen a lot of cases," she said softly. "But this is evil, Mrs. Grace." I didn't respond. I just stared at the fireplace where my truth had turned to ash. "Do you have anywhere you can go? Family? Friends?" I laughed bitterly. "They all think I'm losing my mind. My daughter June tried to check in, but Malcolm told everyone I was senile. And my youngest, Caleb. He moved to the UK 10 years ago and hasn't looked back." Chelsea knelt beside me. "You're not crazy. You're not alone. But it will take time to heal." As if healing were as simple as taking a pill or applying a bandage. The wounds they left weren't on my skin, they were in my spirit. And they ran deep. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards felt like Malcolm's footsteps. Every shadow looked like Terence watching me from the hallway. I crawled into the corner of the living room and wept like a child. But something happened the next morning. I found one of the letters. Not burned. Not lost. It had slipped under the couch. The corner was singed, but the words were still there. It was the last one I'd written, the one that exposed everything. My hands trembled as I read my own handwriting. If you're reading this, I am likely already gone. But please know I didn't run because I was weak. I ran because I wanted to live. My name is Evelyn Grace, and for 5 years, I suffered under the roof of my own son. Please don't let my silence be the last thing I'm remembered for. Help me. Help others. Break the silence. I clutched the letter to my chest. Had something now. Seed. Voice. And I was going to use it. The next day, Chelsea returned and offered me a place in a trauma recovery program for elderly abuse survivors. I was hesitant at first, but she said something that broke me. You've been quiet for 5 years. But someone out there needs your story to survive their own. So I packed my bag, my cross necklace, my letter, and I left that house. I looked back one last time, standing in the driveway. The same spot where I once begged to be let out. But this time I was walking away on my own 2 feet. The neighbor across the street watched from her window. She looked like she wanted to wave, but she didn't. She didn't know. No one did. But they would. They all would. 'Cause I was going to speak. Loudly. Clearly. And finally. Freely. But just when I thought the nightmare was over, I received a letter at the trauma center. No return address. Just one line inside. You think it's over, Mama? The signature. Caleb. You think it's over, Mama? Caleb. I stared at the letter, fingers trembling. The words on the page burned hotter than the fire that had devoured my cries for help. Caleb. My youngest. The sweet boy who once made me macaroni necklaces in Sunday school. The one I thought had escaped the rot that infected his brothers. The one I still held hope for. But this felt like a threat. Chelsea entered my room at the trauma center just as the letter slipped from my hands and floated to the floor. She saw the color drain from my face and rushed to me. Mrs. Grace. Evelyn. What's wrong? I couldn't speak. My throat was thick with fear. I just pointed to the letter. She picked it up, read it slowly, then met my eyes. Do you recognize the handwriting? He nodded. It's Caleb. I know it anywhere. He used to leave me notes in the fridge when he was 10, telling me he'd washed the dishes. Even when he hadn't. I smiled faintly at the memory. But that smile vanished quickly. If he knows where I am, if he found me here. Chelsea took my hand. You're safe here. No one can come in without clearance. We'll notify the authorities. But Evelyn, I need to ask you something difficult. Is there any part of your story involving Caleb that you haven't told us yet? I hesitated. I hadn't mentioned Caleb in much detail because, in my mind, he was the good one. The distant one. The one who got away. But the truth was more complicated than I wanted to admit. I looked out the window, watching the tall trees sway gently in the summer breeze. And then I began to speak. Caleb was always different. Smarter. Softer. More sensitive. He cried during Bambi. He played the piano by ear. I thought I had done something right with him. Pause. But he was also secretive. And angry. Just like his brothers. Only quieter. More dangerous. Chelsea sat down beside me, waiting, patient. There was a night, a few months before Thomas died, I continued slowly, when I heard Caleb shouting on the phone. I remember the words clear as day. I don't owe her anything. She's just a womb. Chelsea's eyebrows furrowed. He was talking about you. He nodded. I confronted him, asked him what he meant. He said I was too dramatic, and that he was just venting. But after that night he stopped calling. He left for the UK, and I never saw him again. I convinced myself it was just growing pains. That he'd come back. But what if he had come back? And not to reconcile, but to finish what his brothers started. Chelsea placed a hand over mine. We'll increase your protection. And if he contacts you again, we'll involve the police directly. But Evelyn, this letter might not be a threat. Might be a cry for attention. Or guilt. I shook my head. No, not guilt. Not from him. Guilt comes with remorse. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the hospital-style bed, watching the ceiling fan spin round and round, my thoughts spinning just as wildly. I remembered moments I had buried long ago, whispers between the boys when they thought I wasn't listening, laughter that had an edge to it, phone calls that ended the moment I walked into the room. Was it all coordinated? Were they all in it together? And more hauntingly, why me? I had done everything right. I had sacrificed everything for them. Stayed up nights. Went hungry some days so they could eat more. Prayed over them. Defended them. Loved them even when they didn't love themselves. Was that my crime? Loving them too much. 2 days passed without another letter, and I started to breathe again. Chelsea encouraged me to participate in group sessions at the center. I sat in a circle with 6 other women, all over the age of 60. Each one had a story. One woman had been poisoned slowly by her daughter for her inheritance. Another locked in her basement by her grandchild who wanted her property. As each woman spoke, I realized something terrifying. We were all versions of the same tragedy. Different details. Same wound. I'm not crazy, I whispered to myself. But even in that room, even with those women, I felt different. Because mine wasn't just abuse. It was betrayal. Bloody. I told my story on the 3rd day. I didn't cry. I didn't stutter. I let it pour out like a flood that had been dammed too long. By the time I finished, one woman, Agnes, reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she whispered. You survived hell. But did I? That evening, Chelsea called me to her office. She looked pale. Nervous. Evelyn, we received another letter for you today. My stomach clenched. From Caleb. She nodded. But this time, there was something else inside. She slid the envelope across the desk. I opened it slowly, my fingers shaking. Inside was a photo. Faded. It was of Thomas, my late husband. But not just any photo. He was standing outside a motel. With a woman. Holding a baby. And scribbled on the back were the words. He wasn't who you thought he was. And neither am I. My heart nearly stopped. Was Caleb trying to tell me that Thomas had another family? Another child? Was Caleb even my son? I clutched my chest, struggling to breathe. Chelsea ran around the desk, calling for help. The room spun. Blacked out. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed again. Machines beeping. For in my arm, Chelsea was there, holding my hand. You fainted, but you're going to be okay, she said gently. They've run all the tests. But I wasn't okay. Because if that photo was real, it meant everything I believed for over 70 years was a lie. My husband wasn't faithful. And my youngest son might not even be mine. A nurse entered the room quietly, holding something in her hand. A man dropped this off for Mrs. Grace, she said. Another envelope. Chelsea took it, opened it carefully and gasped. She turned to me slowly, her eyes wide with horror. Inside the envelope was a single key. And a message. Come to the motel room in the photo if you want the truth. Come alone. I took the key in my hand. It was old. Rusty. The kind of key that unlocks more than just doors. It unlocks secrets. Maybe. Even monsters. The key felt heavier than it should have. I held it between my fingers as though it could cut me. Like it was made of memory, not metal. It had no markings, no tag. Just a cold, old key tied to a location I had hoped was just a ghost from the past. The motel. I hadn't been near that place in over 4 decades. Not since the early days of my marriage to Thomas, when he disappeared for a week and returned with a story about a business trip. I believed him. I always did. But now I had no idea what to believe. Chelsea begged me not to go alone. Evelyn, this is dangerous. Let the police handle it. Please. But something told me I had to see it for myself. I needed to look the truth in the eye. I had spent 5 years being controlled, silenced, degraded by my own children. If I didn't face this final demon now, I never would. So I told her, I've lived through worse than whatever's waiting behind that door. That afternoon, I took a taxi and asked the driver to park 2 blocks away from the old Desert Moon Motel. As I stepped out into the blazing heat, a wave of déjà vu hit me. The cracked pavement, the flickering neon sign, the distant hum of traffic. Nothing had changed. The world had moved on, but this place stayed frozen, like a memory too stubborn to die. I walked past the rusted vending machine, past the moth-eaten curtains hanging in the windows, until I reached the door in the photo. Room 12. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. Click. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was stale with age. A worn-out bed sat in the center of the room. On the far wall, a crooked painting of a desert sunset. And on the table, a single object. Shoebox. Taped shut, covered in dust. I stepped inside cautiously, the door closing behind me with a thud. My fingers hesitated over the tape. I didn't want to open it, but I had come too far not to. Peeled it away slowly. Inside I found documents, photos, birth certificates, and a letter, addressed to me. I opened it, my breath held tight. Evelyn, if you're reading this, then I am already dead. I wanted to tell you the truth a long time ago, but I didn't know how. I made mistakes. One of them was bringing a child into this world and not claiming him as my own. That child is Caleb. He's not your biological son. His mother was a woman I loved before I ever knew how to love you. He needed a home and you were kind. You raised him like he was your own. Delight. And I'm sorry. But please understand it was never meant to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. But lies grow like mold. I see that now. Forgive me if you can. And forgive him too. Caleb knows the truth. That's why he's angry. Not at you. Me. I dropped the letter, my chest rising and falling in slow, painful bursts. Caleb wasn't mine. All those memories, his first words, his little piano recitals, the way he curled up in my arms when he was sick, they weren't built on biology, but on love. And still, in that moment I felt like a thief. Like I had stolen a life that never belonged to me. But then I found something else in the box. A small, worn photo of me holding baby Caleb in the hospital. I recognized my own exhausted smile, the way his little fist clung to my shirt. And scribbled on the back, in Thomas's handwriting. You are his mother in every way that matters. My knees gave out, and I sat on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of my husband's betrayal, and my own resilience. That's when I heard the door behind me creak open. I turned sharply. Caleb stood in the doorway, tall, cold, unreadable. He stepped in and closed the door behind him. So, he said quietly, now you know. I nodded slowly, standing up with effort. Why didn't you ever tell me, Caleb? He laughed bitterly. Because I didn't think you'd care. Because I thought you were in on the lie. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. All my life I felt it. That I didn't belong. And I hated you for pretending I did. I moved toward him cautiously. I never pretended. I loved you. I still do. He looked away. Then why didn't you ever ask where I came from? Because it didn't matter, I whispered. We stood in silence. Until he spoke again. I didn't send those first letters to scare you. I just wanted to shake you. I wanted you to see me. Not as your son. Not as your project. But as a person. With pain. And Terence. Yes. Did you know what he and Malcolm were doing to me? He paused. And that pause answered everything. I suspected, he said finally. But I told myself it wasn't my business. I was so angry. I didn't care if you hurt. I just wanted you to feel something. I stepped forward again, tears now sliding down my cheeks. You were angry at the wrong person. I didn't create the lie. I just carried it. And I carried you. He looked at me then, really looked. The kind of gaze that searches for wounds, not blame. I don't want to be angry anymore, he said. But I don't know how to forgive. Then don't start with forgiveness, I whispered. Start with truth. We stood there, two broken people trying to find each other in a room full of ghosts. He helped me gather the documents, the photos, The pieces of a past I hadn't chosen but had lived all the same. As we stepped outside together, I felt a small flicker inside me. Not peace. Not yet. But maybe the start of healing. Back at the trauma center, Chelsea was waiting. She was surprised to see us together, but said nothing. Caleb asked for a few days to stay nearby. To think, to decide what kind of relationship he was ready for. Gave him space. But that night, I sat in bed rereading Thomas's letter, the words echoing louder now. Lies grow like mold. I decided to have the motel box delivered to the authorities. Everything had to come to light. But just as I was falling asleep, my phone rang. It was a private number. Answered. Static crackled for a moment. Then a voice. Whoa. Familiar. You've been busy, Mama. My heart stopped. Malcolm. Breathe. Long pause. Then he whispered. You should have made sure I was dead. You should have made sure I was dead. The line went dead before I could respond. For a moment I just sat there. Phone slipping from my trembling hand. My heart pounding against my ribcage like a warning bell. Couldn't be real. I had seen him, bloody, still lifeless. The EMTs had pronounced him. There was a body bag. Had they made a mistake? Or had he made the plan? I rushed to the staff office, breath shallow and desperate. Chelsea met me halfway, her face tensing as soon as she saw me. Evelyn, what is it? Could barely speak. He's alive. Malcolm. He just called me. Her expression changed instantly. That's not possible. The coroner signed the documents. He was. I heard him, Chelsea. I know his voice. She stared at me a long moment before nodding slowly. Okay. Then we need to move. Now. Within the hour, the trauma center had a security team stationed outside my room. The police were contacted again. They promised to investigate, but their tone said what they didn't. If he's dead on paper, what more do you want? But I knew Malcolm. And Malcolm had always been 10 steps ahead of everyone. Caleb came by the next morning. I didn't tell him right away. I needed to be sure. But when I did, his face changed. Bill. Quiet. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I didn't tell you at the motel. Tensed. What now? He hesitated, then lowered his voice. After Malcolm's death, or what I thought was his death, I got a message. An anonymous email. No sender. No signature. Just a line that said, blood doesn't die. It remembers. He swallowed hard. I thought it was some cryptic threat from Terrence. But now, I'm not so sure. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared, he snapped. I'm still trying to figure out who I am. And now I might have a dead brother walking around making phone calls? I didn't want to drag you back into this. I stared at him. I was never out of it. He lowered his head in shame. Later that night, I asked Chelsea to give me access to my old voicemail records. She helped me contact the police for authorization. After hours of digital digging, they uncovered something chilling. The emergency services had received 2 calls from my address on the night of the incident. The first was from me. The second came 40 minutes later. From Malcolm's number. The call lasted 17 seconds. No voice. Just breathing. And then silence. The timestamp. 5 minutes after the EMTs declared him dead. I sat frozen. The room felt colder. Had he faked it? Bribed someone? Or was there something else? Something even more twisted at play? My sleep that night was restless. Kept the light on. I checked the door every hour. I flinched at every creak. By dawn I had made a decision. I would go back to the house. Back to the place where it all began. Chelsea and the trauma center staff were against it. Even Caleb tried to talk me out of it. But I was tired of running. Tired of being a hunted animal in a story I didn't write. I called the officer assigned to my case and told him I wanted the house officially searched again. Top to bottom. He agreed to send a team. 2 days later, I stood outside the place that once imprisoned me. The door had been boarded up after the investigation. But once the police opened it, the smell of rot and old silence hit me like a wave. I stepped inside. The couch still had the bloodstain from that night. The lamp I had smashed was gone, but the broken base remained, like a forgotten piece of war. The officers searched upstairs. Then one of them called out, "Ma'am, you need to see this." I climbed the stairs slowly. They had found something behind a false panel in the hallway closet. Small hidden space. Inside were photos. Dozens. Of me. Sleeping. Bathing. Sitting at the table. Images taken over 5 years, without my knowledge. My blood went cold. Taped to the wall was a drawing. Twisted family tree. At the top, Evelyn. Below it, the names of my children. Malcolm's name was circled in red. Terrence's name was slashed through with a knife. And Caleb. His name had a question mark next to it. There were notes in Malcolm's handwriting. Angry scribbles about loyalty, control, inheritance, and betrayal. He hadn't just wanted to hurt me. He had been studying me. Planning something far more sinister than I ever imagined. Behind the pile of photos, the officers found something else. A USB drive. They took it in for analysis. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. By morning, the officer returned with news. The USB contained video files. From surveillance cameras hidden all around the house. But one file was different. It was recent. Dated 3 days after Malcolm's death. It showed a man in a hoodie, entering the house through the basement. The footage was grainy. But even in the poor lighting, I recognized the walk. The shoulders. The limp. Malcolm. He was alive. The officer turned to me. His voice low and cautious. "Ma'am, we're now officially classifying Malcolm as alive and dangerous. We're issuing a warrant immediately." My world spun. If he was alive, then where was he hiding? And more importantly, what was he waiting for? Later that afternoon, I received another letter. No envelope. Just left at the reception desk. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mama. You always thought you were stronger. Let's see how strong you are when the past comes knocking. Room 11. Tomorrow. Noon. Come alone. Or someone else pays the price." No signature. Just one horrifying thought. Room 11. Right next to room 12 at the motel. But who was he threatening? And what past was he referring to? I knew there was only one way to end this. I would go. Even if it meant walking straight into hell again. But I would not go as a victim. This time, I would bring everything he wasn't expecting. Truth. Courage. And the part of me he thought he destroyed. My soul. Because I was no longer just Evelyn Grace, the mother. I was Evelyn Grace, the survivor. And tomorrow, he'd meet the version of me that didn't beg, that didn't hide, that didn't fear. But as I packed my bag with the old letters, the USB copy, and my husband's final confession, I looked into the mirror. And I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Fire. But as I zipped the bag shut, my phone lit up with a new text. It was a photo. Chelsea. Tied to a chair. Gag. Blood trickling down her temple. And the message underneath. "You weren't supposed to tell anyone. Now you both pay." The moment I saw Chelsea's photo, bruised, bloodied, tied, I knew the game had changed. This wasn't just about me anymore. Malcolm had taken someone else. Someone who had stood by me, believed me, protected me when everyone else had turned away. I stared at that image for what felt like hours. I could hear my own heartbeat ringing in my ears. Room 11. Noon. The clock read 10:03 a.m. Had 2 hours. I called Caleb. But he didn't pick up. I messaged the detective. No reply. And just like that, I knew. Malcolm had already begun to cut off my options. He wanted me alone. Desperate. Afraid. But he had underestimated the one thing that had kept me alive through all the years of pain. I had nothing left to lose. I tucked the phone into my coat pocket, slipped a small voice recorder into my bra, and put on the thick hoodie Chelsea had bought me a week ago. I wrapped a scarf over my head. Not for warmth, but for war. By the time I arrived at the motel, the sun was brutal and blinding. Noon struck like a silent scream in the air. I stood in front of room 11, my heart thudding against my ribs. The door wasn't locked. Pushed it open. The room was dark. Thick curtains shut out the light. The air smelled like mold and burnt plastic. And there, sitting in the corner, perfectly calm, was him. Malcolm. Alive. Real. Smiling. He looked thinner. Paler. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken. But the grin on his face still carried that same venom I'd come to know far too well. Told you I wasn't done, he whispered. I stood frozen in the doorway. Where is she? He leaned back. Safe. For now. Depends on you though. Why? My voice cracked, not from fear but rage. Why fake your death? Why come back? His laugh was low, almost childlike. Because you thought you won. You thought bleeding and escaping made you a hero. But you didn't win, Mama. You left me. You chose Terrence over me when I was 5. And then Caleb. A freaking drug addict. You clung to him too. His breathing turned erratic. You never loved me the way you loved them. I took a step forward. I tried. You pushed everyone away. You hurt people. He slammed his fist into the table. Because no one listened. No one ever saw me unless I was breaking things. I kept my eyes locked on his. You weren't invisible. You were sick. But instead of asking for help, you made me your prison. His eyes narrowed. Don't act like a victim now, he hissed. You let me do it. Those words. Those poisoned words. You let me. Like I had ever had a choice. Like the bruises, the tears, the silent nights were permission. I felt my chest crack open. That's what you tell yourself, isn't it? I whispered. That I wanted it. That I asked for the pain. But deep down you know I didn't let you. You took everything. My body. My peace. My sons. His smile faltered. You're afraid, I continued. Because even after all the things you did to me, I'm still standing. You tried to kill my soul. And yet, here I am. He stood suddenly, knocking the chair over. I didn't move. You think this ends here, he growled. I've got Chelsea. I've got the videos. I'll leak them. I'll make you a joke. An old woman crying rape after 5 years of silence. I reached into my coat slowly. You sure about that? Yes. He paused. I pulled out the USB and held it up. This has everything. Not just your abuse. Not just your surveillance. But your plans. Your drawings. Your voice. His expression cracked for the first time. I took out a phone and played the voice recording from our last call. You should have made sure I was dead. The pitch in his breathing changed. I sent it to the police this morning, I lied. To every journalist I could find. It's only a matter of time. He lunged. But I was ready. I ducked to the side and slammed the edge of the table into his leg. He collapsed, groaning in pain. His knife slid out from under his sleeve and skidded across the floor. Grabbed it. He tried to reach for my ankle, but I kicked him in the ribs. You said I let you, I said, my voice trembling. But now you're going to see what it feels like to be powerless. I tied him up with the cable cords I had hidden in my bag, just like he used to do to me. Then I walked to the closet. Behind a broken wall panel, I found Chelsea, gagged and bruised but alive. She sobbed when she saw me. It's over, I whispered. But as I helped her up, a sound stopped me. Click. Behind me. Turned slowly. Malcolm had broken free from the cords, just enough to grab something from the table. A gun. My breath caught. He raised it with a shaking hand. But before he could pull the trigger, a bang exploded through the room. Malcolm dropped to the ground, blood pouring from his side. Behind him stood Caleb, holding a gun, hands trembling, face pale. I followed you, he said, gasping. I couldn't let him take you. Not again. I fell to my knees. It was over. This time. Really over. 6 months later the trial began. Malcolm survived the gunshot. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He tried to manipulate the jury. Blamed the abuse on confused affection. He tried to make me look insane. But the evidence was undeniable. He was sentenced to 40 years without parole. Chelsea recovered. She opened a trauma shelter named Room 11, dedicated to survivors of family abuse. Caleb started therapy. He went back to school. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was healing. And me. I started living. For the first time in my 71 years, I woke up every morning and didn't flinch at shadows. I spoke at conferences. Told my story. Not for pity, but for power. To show the world that abuse can wear any face, even the one you gave birth to. And that surviving isn't just about escaping. It's about reclaiming your voice. Your worth. Name. I am Evelyn Grace. I am a mother. Fighter. A survivor. And this is not the end of my story. This is the beginning.